Here goes DiJonai. You talking to that bitch? You talking to that bitch? Bitch this, bitch that. I'm like, why I gotta be a bitch? Literally, on my grandmother's grave, I'm like, damn, why I gotta be a bitch? That's how the whole thing started. I'm literally like, who's a bitch?
That right there is where this whole thing stopped being just internet noise. Because once somebody is on live asking, why do I have to be that word? Now it is not just a tweet, not just a party rumor, and not just fans screenshotting drama. It becomes a locker room adjacent mess with names attached, relationships attached, and a season still going on.
Moving on, next point. Then to bring up folks' name that has nothing to do with anything. These folks is minding their business. These folks woke up to this shit on a random Sunday night of these type of allegations.
And listen to how she frames it. She is not starting with basketball. She is not starting with a box score. She is starting with the fact that other people got dragged into something on a random Sunday night. People who, according to her, were minding their business. That is the first real layer of this story. Not who was right at the party. Not who said what first. The bigger question is why this had to become public in the middle of a season at all. Because in the WNBA, one messy live stream or one messy post does not stay contained anymore. It jumps from Twitch, to Twitter, to fan pages, to sports commentary, to the actual team environment. And once that happens, the people who are not trying to be the story suddenly become the story. But the part that should actually bother Vegas fans comes later. Because this is not only about Nalyssa Smith responding, this is about how one player's off-court chaos can start attaching itself to someone else's contract, someone else's reputation, and possibly someone else's future in that building.
Like, I think that's very weird. Mind you, I've seen this young lady multiple times. This is not the first time that we've seen each other. Not the first time we've seen each other. We've crossed paths. We've seen each other the night before. We've seen each other play against each other. Like, there's no static. There was no static. But I guess the liquor, the cameras, her crowd, I guess she got some type of, somebody boosted her up to gain some confidence.
That is the part that makes this clip important. Nalyssa is basically saying, we have seen each other before. We have crossed paths before. We have played against each other before. There was no static before. So in her version of events, the issue is not that there was some long-running public confrontation that finally boiled over. Her issue is that, if someone had a problem, there were apparently multiple chances to say something face-to-face before it became a public spectacle. And that matters, because the internet always wants to turn these stories into one clean villain and one clean victim. But real team drama is rarely that simple. It is usually about timing, audience, ego, alcohol, cameras, friends gassing people up, and then suddenly, everybody is performing for an invisible crowd. The wild thing is, Nalyssa is not even pretending this is some polished PR statement. She is clearly irritated. She is speaking in the language of somebody who feels like they got pulled into something they did not choose. And whether you agree with every word or not, the emotion is obvious. But that also creates a second problem. Because the moment she goes live, she gives the story more oxygen. Now the original post or confrontation is no longer the only story. The response becomes a new story. The reaction to the response becomes another story. And the cycle feeds itself. That is why this kind of drama is so dangerous for teams. It does not need a press conference. It does not need a reporter in the locker room. It only needs one person to go live, one screen recording to spread, and suddenly the whole league is watching.
We came to the spot, folks was chilling, nobody did nothing to nobody. I ain't go out my way to go bother anybody or come to somewhere uninvited. I never came somewhere uninvited. I came with a group of folks and they was like, oh, this the last spot to go to before it.
Now this detail is important because she is pushing back on one specific accusation, the idea that she showed up somewhere uninvited or came looking for trouble. According to her, she came with a group, people were going to one last spot before it closed, and nobody was trying to bother anybody. Again, that is her side of it. That does not automatically prove every detail, but it does tell you why she felt the need to respond. Because once the public version becomes, you pulled up uninvited, or you came there to start something, that is not a small claim. That is a character claim. And character claims are where WNBA drama gets ugly fast. Fans do not just argue the moment. They start rewriting the person. One clip becomes, this is who she is. One argument becomes, this is what she always does. One messy night becomes a whole career narrative. That is why Nalyssa keeps circling back to the same basic point. We have been around each other before, there was no issue, so why is this becoming a thing now? And whether you think that is a fair defense or not, you can understand why she would not want silence to be interpreted as guilt. In the social media era, silence is rarely treated as silence. It gets treated as confirmation. So players feel pressure to answer, even when answering makes the fire bigger. That is the trap. If you do not respond, people say you are hiding. If you do respond, people say you are messy. And the whole time, the season keeps moving.
So then it causes commotion. I'm just like, damn. Now what?
That was the Aces championship ceremony, wasn't it? That was the Aces championship ceremony, I think, wasn't it? What's she talking about here? Like, this is mad. This is mad stuff right here. The damn Nalyssa Smith. The Nalyssa Smith files, or the DiJonai files, are coming out. Like, it is mad. It's this whole thing is crazy.
Now the host reaction here is basically disbelief. And honestly, that is probably how a lot of people process this. Because from the outside, it feels absurd that this became one of the bigger All-Star Weekend adjacent conversations. Not a scheme breakdown, not a standings race, not a player's second-half jump, a personal argument spilling onto social media. But there is a reason people locked onto it. This was not random drama from people outside the league. These are real WNBA names, real relationships, real teams, and real consequences. That is why the who cares about the party framing only goes so far. On one hand, yes, the party itself is not the basketball story. Nobody is winning games because of what happened at a late-night spot. Nobody is losing by 20 because of one live stream. But the party becomes relevant when it starts exposing tension that can follow players back into the workplace. That is the line. The public does not need to know every private argument. But if private arguments become public enough to affect how players are talked about, how teammates are questioned, and how organizations are forced to manage distraction, then it becomes part of the basketball conversation whether people like it or not. And that is why this whole thing feels bigger than the actual words in the clips. The controversy is not just who said what. The controversy is, why does this keep happening around the same circle of names? Because once a player gets a reputation for being surrounded by drama, every new incident gets added to a file. Fair or unfair, that file follows them. And once fans start connecting those dots, the basketball conversation changes.
Mad. Nalyssa Smith's correct here. We don't hear about Nalyssa unless DiJonai brings it up. Well, yeah, this sounds like a whole like Nalyssa Smith being sick about DiJonai, sick of DiJonai. And to be fair, like we saw it coming into this season. Like DiJonai was probably like a 150-pound weight lifted off her shoulders coming into this season. And she suddenly is looking now like I'm not going to say all-star, but looking really good.
This is where the host makes the pivot from the incident itself to the pattern. He is saying, look at the before and after. Look at how people are viewed when they are attached to the drama, and look at how they are viewed when they are no longer attached to it. Now you have to be careful with that kind of argument, because correlation is not proof. A player can improve because of coaching, role, health, confidence, spacing, touches, or simply being in a better situation. It is too easy to say, this person left so everything got better, and ignore every basketball reason underneath it. But the reason this angle sticks is because fans do not only watch stats, they watch vibes, they watch body language, they watch whether a team feels calm or chaotic. And when someone leaves one environment and suddenly looks freer, people are going to ask whether the off-court weight was part of it. That is what the host is tapping into. He is saying Nalyssa looks lighter now, and DiJonai looks like a weight that other people are better off not carrying. That is harsh. It is also clearly opinion, not a proven fact. But it is the kind of opinion that spreads because it gives fans a simple explanation for complicated movement. And that is where the danger begins. Once the internet decides you are the common denominator, every situation becomes evidence. Even situations where the facts are incomplete. Even situations where the other person also played a role. Even situations where nobody outside that circle actually knows the full truth. So if you are DiJonai Carrington, that is the part you have to understand. The issue is not one post. It is not one argument. It is that people are now building a pattern around you. And once that pattern hardens, it becomes almost impossible to shake.
And it does seem like when it comes to DiJonai, like Like, it is genuinely, it's just, she's the opposite of the Midas touch. She's the opposite of the Midas touch. Like, at this stage, like, she might, like, everything in general, it is the absolute opposite. Where, everything she touches turns to shit. Everything DiJonai Carrington touches.
This is probably the most brutal framing in the whole transcript. The opposite of the Midas touch. Everything she touches turns into a mess. That is not a light accusation. That is the kind of line that sticks because it is simple, sharp, and cruel enough for the internet to repeat. But underneath the insult, there is a real sports question. How much off-court instability can a team tolerate from someone connected to the locker room before it becomes an organizational problem? Because teams do not only evaluate points, rebounds, assists, defense, spacing, and salary, they evaluate reliability. They evaluate whether your presence makes the building easier or harder. They evaluate whether your orbit brings focus or noise. And that is not just about the player causing the drama directly. Sometimes the more difficult problem is the person next to the player. A partner, a friend, a trainer, a family member, an online circle. If that person constantly pulls attention, the team may not be able to discipline them, bench them, or trade them. But the distraction still lands on the roster. That is why this situation gets so uncomfortable. If a player's girlfriend, partner, or close circle becomes the source of public drama, the team is not just managing the player. They are managing everything that comes attached to the player. And nobody wants to say that part out loud because it sounds personal. But professional sports are personal. The business is personal. The locker room is personal. The travel schedule is personal. The trust is personal. If one person's outside life keeps walking into the team's inside life, eventually basketball people start making basketball decisions with that in mind. That does not mean anyone should be punished for who they date. That would be ridiculous. But it does mean public mess has a cost. And when the mess keeps finding its way onto timelines, teams eventually ask the coldest question in sports: is this worth it?
Lift it off you and your team. And the problem is, now, and the weight of DiJonai Carrington is not lifted off Nalyssa Smith because Nalyssa Smith plays with DiJonai's girlfriend. At this stage, you're like, what exactly, like, is there to be gained? What is there to be gained by DiJonai?
And now we get to the key question of the whole video. What was there to gain by posting it? That is the question that separates a private grievance from a public mistake. Because sometimes people post because they want accountability. Sometimes they post because they feel wronged. Sometimes they post because they want to control the story before someone else does. And sometimes, especially when emotions are high, they post because the post feels good for 10 minutes and becomes a problem for 10 weeks. From the outside, this looked like one of those moments where the immediate satisfaction did not match the long-term consequences, because once Nalyssa responds, the story does not end. It gets bigger. Once fans start connecting Jackie Young's name to the conversation, the story gets even bigger. Once the Aces get mentioned, now it becomes a team-adjacent story. And once team-adjacent stories show up during the season, coaches and front offices notice. That is the part players and people around players have to be smarter about. Not because they should live like robots. Not because they should never defend themselves, but because every public move has a blast radius. And in this case, the blast radius may be larger than the original issue. The original issue might have been an argument, a party moment, a disrespectful word, or a misunderstanding. But the aftermath created a bigger perception that the drama is portable. It travels from team to team, relationship to relationship, timeline to timeline. That is why the host sounds almost relieved that the Fever are not attached to it anymore. Because whatever you think of Indiana's own chaos, this specific mess is not theirs to manage.
Posting this. At the same time, like, look, DiJonai has probably gone out of her way. She probably did it drunk. But you've now got Nalyssa Smith having to come out on Twitch and talk about the whole situation during a season. I am so happy. I am so happy. So happy this has nothing to do with the Fever. I am so happy that the Fever don't have to worry about their starting power forward and starting shooting guard being caught in some messy situation.
That relief is one of the most revealing parts of the video. He is not just saying, "This is messy." He is saying, "I am happy my team does not have to deal with this." And that is exactly how fans think when they have watched a season get hijacked by side stories. They do not want their starting power forward pulled into late-night drama. They do not want their guard answering questions about somebody else's tweet. They do not want the team's momentum competing against someone's live stream, because once the story reaches the team level, it becomes a distraction multiplier. The player has to deal with it. The teammate connected to the player has to deal with it. The coach may get asked about it. The fan base starts splitting into sides, and suddenly the organization is not only trying to win games, it is trying to keep nonsense from becoming a second opponent. That is why the Fever angle is so interesting here. The Fever have had plenty of noise around them, especially because anything near Caitlin Clark becomes national conversation instantly. But this particular kind of internal personal drama, the host is saying he is glad that is not in Indiana's building anymore. And that is a serious statement, because it shows how quickly a player's value can be separated from their talent. You can be good, you can be useful, you can have moments, but if the perception becomes that your situation brings constant stress, fans start calculating your value differently. The cold truth is that front offices do the same thing. They may not say it publicly. They may dress it up with words like fit, culture, availability, and professionalism. But they notice who makes the job harder.
Because, like, Becky Hammond, it feels like Becky Hammond might just fucking cut Nalyssa Smith, or cut, like, she's not going to cut Jackie Young. But, like, this could run Jackie Young out of Vegas. Like, it could potentially run Jackie Young out of Vegas. If this ends up being a negative impact on Jackie Young the second half of the season, and she doesn't get her Supermax or Max deal, she might get ran out of Vegas. And we might actually be seeing a situation where a player gets ran out of a team because their girlfriend decided to be messy on Twitter.
Now this is where the stakes jump, because the host brings Jackie Young into it. And to be clear, any claim that this could affect Jackie's future is speculation. There is no official statement here saying the Aces are moving her, punishing her, or changing her contract plans because of this drama. But the reason the speculation lands is because Jackie Young is not some random bench player. She is a major piece in Vegas. She has real value, real leverage, and real expectations around her. So when her name gets attached to off-court drama, fans immediately start asking whether this could become something bigger than gossip. That is the nightmare scenario for any star-level player. Not that people talk about you, but that people start talking about whether the people around you are making your professional life more complicated. And this is where Becky Hammond's side of it matters too. A coach of a contender does not want to babysit drama. Coaches deal with injuries, rotations, matchups, egos, pressure, travel, media, and championship expectations. The last thing a coach wants is a player's personal circle creating headlines that have nothing to do with basketball. Again, this does not mean Jackie did anything wrong. That is the important distinction. Being adjacent to a situation is not the same as causing it, but in sports, adjacency can still be exhausting. And if the story keeps growing, the person closest to the storm often gets soaked even if they never started the rain. That is why this becomes bigger than Nalyssa versus DiJonai. It becomes a warning about collateral damage. One person posts, another person responds, fans connect a third person, and now the fourth person's team has to hear about it. That is how modern sports drama works. It does not move in a straight line. It spreads like smoke.
You really don't. And it's funny where it's like, you can be messy as long as the messiness doesn't go internal. Like, whatever about Sophie Cunningham. Like, so, nothing that Sophie Cunningham says / does. Basically, anything anyone says / does gets brought back on Caitlin Clark. So, we can say that. Like, it doesn't really matter in Caitlin Clark's case because everything is brought back on her. At the same time, with Sophie Cunningham, most of her drama is directly at her. If Sophie says something, if Lexi says something, Aaliyah doesn't get hate. But
this comparison to Sophie Cunningham is actually one of the sharper points in the whole video, because he is separating external drama from internal drama. External drama is when a player talks trash, gets into it with fans, says something spicy, or becomes the villain for another fan base. Teams can live with that if the locker room stays clean. Sometimes they even like it because it creates edge, identity, and attention. Internal drama is different. Internal drama makes teammates uncomfortable. Internal drama puts relationships under a spotlight. Internal drama creates questions nobody wants to answer. And internal drama can make people start choosing sides even when they do not want to. That is the distinction the host is making. If Sophie Cunningham says something, the controversy usually stays attached to Sophie. Maybe Caitlin gets dragged into it because Caitlin gets dragged into everything, but it is still not the same as a love triangle type story orbiting one team's actual players. And this is where the WNBA's media environment makes everything worse. The league is growing, but the coverage ecosystem is still messy. Fan accounts move fast. Clips get cut without full context. Personal relationships become content. And because there are fewer games and fewer teams than some major men's leagues, every interpersonal storyline feels bigger. In the NBA or NFL, a messy player-adjacent rumor can disappear under 20 other headlines by dinner. In the WNBA, especially when recognizable names are involved, it can dominate the day. That means players have less margin for public mess. The audience is smaller in some ways, but the attention is more concentrated. And when the attention is concentrated, every little flame feels like a fire.
Now you've got a fucking weird love triangle type situation going on amongst the team. For a player who, let's be very clear, like Caitlin Clark, the only time I've ever seen Caitlin Clark not look present in her career was the 7-point game versus the Atlanta Dream, when DiJonai was 15 feet away from Caitlin Clark and didn't like an answer Caitlin Clark gave to the media, and instead of, bringing it up with Caitlin Clark, who she was 15 feet away from, decided to tweet out an essay complaining about Caitlin Clark, amplifying the whole situation to the extent where the media ran after Caitlin Clark to ask her another question. Caitlin had to, was completely shook, having to fucking re-answer the question.
Now we get the Caitlin Clark callback, and this is where the host connects the current drama to a broader pattern he believes he saw last season. His claim is that one of the rare times Caitlin looked genuinely unsettled was after the Atlanta Dream situation when DiJonai was nearby, did not like an answer Caitlin gave, and then took the complaint public instead of addressing it directly. That is his interpretation of the moment. The key verified part from this transcript is not a league ruling or an official finding. It is the host's argument that public posting amplified something that could have been handled differently, and that is the common thread he is building. Not just conflict, but conflict being exported to the timeline. That is why fans get so frustrated with this kind of behavior. It is not because players are never allowed to be mad. They are human. They can disagree. They can feel disrespected. They can defend themselves. But when the first move is public escalation, everybody else gets dragged into the consequences. If someone is 15 feet away, fans ask, why not say it there? If someone has seen you multiple times, fans ask, why bring it online now? If there is no static in person, fans ask, why does the internet version suddenly look so explosive? Those questions may not always be fair, but they are predictable, and predictability matters. If you already know the internet is going to turn your words into a league-wide story, then posting becomes a decision with predictable damage. This is the late payoff of the video. The issue is not whether one argument happened. The issue is the method. The pattern people are reacting to is not simply DiJonai had a problem. It is DiJonai had a problem, and somehow everybody else had to deal with it publicly. That is why this story hit a nerve. Because fans are tired of basketball being interrupted by side conflicts that feel avoidable.
And it's like, there's a joke where it's like, this is hilarious. So it's like CCFC in 2024.
Here goes DiJonai.
It was like every single week DiJonai would say something or do something. Every single week it was just having to deal with some shit DiJonai as a fan base, as a player. And you better believe even DiJonai joking about the eye poke on live stream maybe a month after the season ended. And no, this was 3 to the dome. That was nothing to do with the eye poke. That being said, she laughed at it afterwards.
And this ending explains why the host is so blunt about being glad she is no longer connected to his team. He is remembering an entire season where, in his view, the fan base constantly had to deal with something new. Now again, memory is not a court transcript. Fan memory is emotional. It compresses moments. It exaggerates patterns. It keeps receipts selectively. But fan memory also shapes reputation, and reputation shapes how every new controversy gets interpreted. That is the biggest lesson here for DiJonai, Nalyssa, Jackie, Vegas, and honestly the whole league. In 2026, the court is not the only place players are evaluated. They are evaluated in interviews, on live streams, through likes, reposts, comments, friend groups, relationships, and reactions after midnight. That may not be fair, but it is real. Nalyssa Smith's response showed one side of the frustration. She felt people were being dragged into allegations and drama they did not ask for. The host's reaction showed the other side. Fans see a recurring pattern and are tired of the mess following certain names around. And Jackie Young's name being pulled into the conversation shows the most serious consequence of all: the person most damaged by drama is not always the person who started it. That is why teams preach professionalism. It is not because they want players to have no personality. It is because the season is fragile, chemistry is fragile, trust is fragile. And when a team is trying to win, every unnecessary distraction is a tax. So now the question is simple. Is this just one ugly off-court moment that will disappear by the next game? Or is this the kind of pattern that eventually makes teams and teammates say, enough is enough? Because if Vegas keeps winning, this probably fades. Winning covers a lot. Winning makes people call drama passion. Winning turns tension into personality. But if the second half gets rocky, if Jackie Young's name keeps getting dragged into stories she does not need, if Becky Hammon has to keep managing headlines that have nothing to do with schemes, then this stops being funny very quickly. And that is the choice for fans too. Do you see this as harmless WNBA drama that the internet blew up for content? Or do you see it as another warning sign that public mess is starting to follow the same people into too many rooms? Drop your take in the comments, because this one is not just about who won the argument. It is about who has to pay for it after the live stream ends. Like the video, subscribe to the channel, and tell me straight, is this just gossip, or is this becoming a real basketball problem?